It's been around for a long time, and one of the things it does is give the public an opportunity to have an impact on the federal decision-making process. Here you see the NEPA process. We started with a notice of intent. It was published in the Federal Register in May 2014. We're now in public scoping, and if you wish to make written comments for the record that will be considered in the EIS, please get them in by July 7th. They have to be postmarked by that date, or I think emailed by that date, or they're not going to be examined. The draft EIS, or PEIS, Programmatic Environmental Impact Statement, will be released in April 2015. That is the plan. Everything goes according to plan. And at that time, there will be another opportunity for public review and comment. That comment period will last something like 45 days to 60 days. And then we'll get those comments, examine them, and one of the things the federal law and NEPA requires every agency to do is to respond to those comments. It's part of keeping the federal government accountable. So the final PEIS then is set for something along the lines of September 2015. And then NASA will be publishing along with that a record of decision, or ROD, around about October 2015. Next. So again, I think Don mentioned what the purpose of scoping it, that it is to give all members of the public, stakeholders, public agencies, a chance to see what this project is about, and to let us know what you think needs to be analyzed or addressed in this EIS. Under the proposed action, the plan, the master plan, would be implemented, and the PEIS would be looking at such issues and changes and such processes as land use, development, transportation, a couple I don't have up here, wildlife, air quality, water resources, including quantity and quality of water. The environment is considered in a very, very broad sense under NEPA. We also look at socioeconomic impacts in an area called environmental justice, that is impact on minority and low-income communities. So the major contents of the EIS are four. First is the purpose and need. What purpose and need is being fulfilled by the proposed action? And the alternatives to that action. What is the government attempting to accomplish? The second part is the proposed action and alternatives. At the very least, every one of these documents has to have the no action alternative, sometimes referred to as keep things as they are. That is, you don't do nothing, you continue doing things the way that you are right now. In this case, the proposed action would be implementation of the 20-year master plan. And what we then do is look at the impact of that implementation on the affected environment. That is, those aspects of the environment that might possibly be affected or impacted in some way by what is being proposed. That's what number 4 is, environmental consequences. So those two are very closely linked. The affected environment, and then, so we describe what that environment looks like right now, and then what it may look like in the future as a result of implementation of the proposed action, the no action, and or others. The purpose and need, just to reiterate real quickly here, to help KSC transition from a government and program-focused, single-user launch complex to a more capability-centric and cost-effective multi-user spaceport. And then the need related to that purpose is to adopt and implement strategies that support NASA's institutional infrastructure and programs. So proposed action and alternatives. The PEIS is going to consider a range of future scenarios for repurposing existing facilities and recapitalizing infrastructure, for reorganizing the management of KSC and its land resources with potentially different kinds of partnerships. And proposed action, transition to a multi-user spaceport over the next 20 years. And then the no action alternative would be a KSC master plan would not be implemented. Things would be kept as they are now. affected environment. What are the existing conditions at KSC? Again, such things as air quality, water resources, both water quality and water quantity, wildlife, other activities that take place in other jurisdictions that occur right now at KSC, such as Canaveral National Seashore and Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge. What is the socioeconomic impact right now, and what would it be under the proposed actions? What are noise conditions, so on and so forth. A wide range, and we'd be interested in hearing what you think, what aspects of the environment ought to be looked at. So when we consider environmental consequences in an environmental impact statement, the first thing to recognize is that they are not necessarily negative, or as we call them, adverse. They can also be beneficial or positive. And then we look at the magnitude, how much of a resource is being impacted, the duration or frequency, how long will it be impacted? Is it being affected just during the construction process? Will it be impacted over a period of 5 or 10 years or forever? The extent, how far will that impact extend outwards? Over how large an area? An entire viewshed, watershed, wildlife population, a county, and it will depend on the particular resource in question. What is the likelihood or probability that that impact will occur? Environmental science tends not to be exact. We make the best predictions we can, but a lot of times those are within ranges. It would be dishonest to say that we can say with 100% assurance in some instance that some impact will exactly occur and 97% of something will be affected. We usually can't be that definite. And then finally, the precedence or uniqueness. How unusual is the type of impact in question? If it's very unusual or unique, then it tends to have a higher rating. Ultimately, one of the things that we'll be looking at is whether or not an impact is considered significant. When NEPA asks us to look at are potentially significant environmental impacts and to focus on those. And again, sometimes they can be positive as well. So one of the major types of impact in a PEIS, programmatic, which is very general and broad, are cumulative effects, where we look at not only the proposed action and its impact accumulated over time on resource X, for example, but you also look at past actions that have led to some cumulative condition of the resource, and you look at the potential impact of, in this case, non-NASA actions in combination with the effect of those actions by NASA. And that combination can be additive, it can be subtractive. It's not necessarily additive, sometimes it can be synergistic, meaning even more than additive. These are all some of the things that can occur. PEIS and decision making, when do you decide on your course of action? After you have had environmental input, including from the public. So, here's your opportunity to tell us what you think. Again, in order for the comments to be considered, they have to be in writing. If you come up here and speak, then they are being recorded by our court recorder or transcriber, and so they will be in written form. I think there are posters out here that say the same things, the handout, perhaps the comment form. There's a comment form that you can turn in tonight or mail in. It's got the address right on it. Come up to the microphone. Yeah, I think we've been to this one. And for additional information, you can visit the website that has been referenced a couple of times now. The master plan has one, the PEIS also has one, and I believe it is listed on some of the forms we have out here as well. The next opportunity for public input will be, again, as we expect, approximately April to June 2015 is when the draft PEIS should be ready to go public. And at that time, there will be approximately a month and a half to 2 months opportunity to comment. We will meet once again, once you've had a chance to look at it, and this time you can give comments based on what you think the document says about the impacts that we have identified. Is that the last one? I'll go back to the other one then. So with that, I think we had some little slips of paper back there. I think the first ones to be handed out were blue.
I'm Clay Henderson, reside in New Smyrna Beach. I'm here tonight on behalf of the Florida Trust for Historic Preservation and Friends of Canaveral, which is the citizen support group for Canaveral National Seashore, and also asked to indicate support from the National Defenders of Wildlife. We express some generalized concerns that we've heard all along, which is that we hope as this goes forward, we keep this information current and transparent and out there. We understand some of the technical issues that you had in getting this website up. It's a good website, but we only saw this 8 days ago. Putting something in the National Register just before the Memorial Day weekend is not the way to get adequate help. It is adequate legally, but it does send a message, and that's the people out here tonight. So that we would start with that. There's a lot of things here that we like, so there are a lot of things that are not surprises. I think a lot of people were in this room back in February commenting to another EIS that's going forward regarding lands to the north. I could say generally that we are strongly supportive of the future land use designation that is there, shows the area north of Hollover to remain as buffer and conservation lands and open for public use and recreation consistent with its management with the National Seashore and the National Wildlife Refuge. We think that is good, very important part of this proposed programmatic EIS, and we hope that that stays the same. To that end, the reason for doing that is that it protects important natural resources to the north, and protects habitat for listed species, and protects significant historical resources. So to that degree, we would say that the planning concepts that you've set forth in this plan, protection of 41,000 acres of wetlands, protection of 25,000 acres of listed species habitat, concerns for future sea level rise, climate change issues are all the right planning concepts to begin with. And so, for instance, to change the designation for those lands north of Hollover would be inconsistent with that. And so going forward with your specific programs, we hope that the issues will be looking at it from those goals. And so there are things there that we support, which is we like the fact that you are evolving commercial uses within the KSC boundaries. That is significant. But with those specifics, when we go forward with this, look at those issues, the proposed new horizontal vertical east-west facility, impacts on wetlands, impacts on listed species. The proposed new pads C and D, impacts to wetlands, impacts to species habitat. The enlarged current use or proposed use of the existing shuttle launch facility also has a potential impact on listed species. All those issues need to be looked at. And then overall, there's this overarching concept that I think a lot of these people here today concerned that this will be limitations on public access to the beach. 30 years ago, a young Congressman Nelson worked very hard to move the beach road to its current location to avoid the impacts or conflicts between NASA and the beach users. And this puts us right back to where we were 30 years ago, and that will be an impact. 1 million users of that facility, 1 million visitors each year of Canaveral National Seashore. It's a major resource for our community. We will be following up with written comments. We will see you tomorrow night in New Smyrna Beach, and I wish you well going forward.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Laura Seward. Tonight I am representing myself as a private citizen who is involved on this, and I'm a very strong supporter of the space industry locally. I'm a very strong supporter of NASA becoming a multi-user spaceport. I think that's fantastic. I applaud the efforts here. I applaud the mentality. I love that this area is changing so much that we now have this kind of master plan going forward. That said, this came as a little bit of a surprise to me once I read the master plan. There are a number of things that I hope that this EIS will address. plans for 39C and D. If we have that kind of demand for those launch pads, fantastic. If you really think that we can get people to use them, I think that's great. However, I am concerned that we will not have that kind of capacity. I'm wondering how many potential users have expressed interest in 39C and D, whether they're even necessary at all. I'm wondering about the use of 39B. There's been discussion as to whether we can make 39B a multi-use pad. I don't know, I'm not an engineer, I'm a scientist, not an engineer, so I don't know if you can feasibly make a pad multi-use for different rockets, but there's been talk about it, so I'm curious to know if that's possible. I'm also curious to know how often SLS will actually launch from there. The skeptic in me wonders, you know, if SLS will come to launch, and I truly hope that we do have a program that stays active and for several years and many administrations, I truly do. But in case that we don't, or in case SLS launches with very infrequent rates, what kind of capacity is at 39B that we can use instead of building 2 additional launch pads? Also wondering, myself, I've been here in February, for example, for the Shiloh Commercial Spaceport EIS, and I'm wondering how this will affect those plans. Sounds like these EISs will be coming out at about the same time, and this particular one does not seem to address the other one. Wondering why this particular proposal to keep commercial space pads within the range is going to address the concerns that commercial space industry has expressed, and why, for example, SpaceX is now going to go to Texas for their launch pad. They want to get away from the range, they want to get away from government interference altogether, except for the FAA. So what makes this plan attractive to users like SpaceX or any other user? I hope it does, but what is it that's going to make this attractive? Also wondering about Air Force range bottlenecking, you know, how many users, how many commercial users can be using the range at one time. And I'm also wondering about the interaction between Space Florida, the state of Florida, and Kennedy Space Center. Kennedy Space Center Director Bob McMahon is on record saying that he supports the Shiloh Commercial Launchpad project if the EIS comes out supportive of it. I'm wondering then why it seems here that NASA KSC is at odds, it seems, with Space Florida. I'm wondering why there's competing funds, competing plans between federal dollars, federal plans, federal land use, and state dollars, state plans, state land use. So it seems to be a disconnect there, and I'm very concerned about it. So I'm really hoping that this plan, as it evolves, will address all of those concerns and more. I'm also worried about our previous speaker, what he said about the wetland use and the access to the beach. Shiloh is such a small area plan. That proposal is 200 acres, and that's very, very tiny. This is going to be much bigger. And I'm an environmentalist myself, as well as a space supporter, and I really hope that we have the best use of the land and minimize the impacts environmentally. Thank you very much.
Michael Luger, Titusville, Florida. Just a question, and I hope to get an answer. She kind of threw out a million questions. I don't think we're going to answer right now, but on the procedure of this, you know, we're getting, say for example, the horizontal launch and landing. This fellow here, Mario, you know, it's up in the air. It's an open-ended sort of project. I wonder how even the public can comment, or yourselves make studies of the environmental impact of those, when it could be maybe it's just a rail with some pylons in those wetlands, or if it's a full landfill sort of scenario when the projects are not terribly defined. How does it work to come up with an impact?
Well, I think that is a reasonable question to try and answer briefly. What it might lead to is an environmental assessment later on that tears off of this document. Once we have something more specific to work with.
How does the public then become educated enough to make a comment, say in this forum or?
Well, you can still comment on what you think those impacts might be.
Thanks, sir.
Yep.
He's not happy.
Please state your name.
Robert Ely, and I'm here just as a concerned citizen. I'd like to thank NASA for allowing the public to comment. I do have some concerns that Mr. Henderson raised as well on the limited notification. It didn't seem to be widely publicized. That being said, we do thank you for the opportunity. We also, I'd like to applaud NASA for their evolution. They are no longer, or their operational capacity is shrinking, and they're looking at becoming a multi-user spaceport. The thing that alarms me about that is, in layman's terms, that means you're becoming a landlord. And the evolution of a landlord, to me, is more rentals. And I think what we're seeing out there on the nice displays that are quite vague is just the beginning. And I'm not qualified to speak on the environmental impact, but I do recognize Canaveral National Seashore, Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge, and Mosquito Lagoon. They're national assets as well, and they're assets to this community that we hold near and dear to our hearts. So I'd like to challenge NASA to set aside permanently, so we don't continually go through this, as Mr. Henderson stated, set aside permanently public access to some of those national assets that this community treasures. I'd also like to challenge you to open this forum, publicize it better. There's scientists that work at NASA and for their subcontractors that have worked out there for many, many years and know that environment better than any scientist around, and they're not allowed to comment publicly. That's a shame. I'd also I'd just like to ask the community to remain engaged, and we've heard promises before from our government, and not to use a simple analogy, but if you like your health care, you'll be able to keep it. Be very guarded in what you hear and the promises that are made to you.
Progressive Alliance, I'm not officially representing. One of the critical elements that helped to allay the environmental concerns that were expressed at the start of the Space Shuttle program was a commitment by NASA to support a detailed, continuing, unbiased, and highly scientific program of environmental monitoring, continually assessing not only the environment of Kennedy Space Center, but the exact effects that each of the launch and industrial operations had on that environment. That was supported by the Space Shuttle program, and we need to see a commitment from NASA to support continuing that effort for the duration of the future plans with both NASA and commercial launch activities. Is a snapshot at one point in time. Actual launch operations in Florida will hopefully continue indefinitely, and I think that we need to continue to monitor that critical environment and to also provide program planners with the information they need to minimize any environmental impacts in the future.
Came over in 1977, worked on the shuttle, Titan, then the Atlas-5, and over in Titusville, from Christmas and all that good stuff. But anyway, what I do is public access sailing, and basically over in Orlando, they closed the Naval Training Center over there. We formed Lake Baldwin Florida Community Sailing and put a sailing program there on a lake that used to be part of the Naval Training Center. Basically, what I'm looking for is NASA Causeway in US 1. That's the old badging station, the first badging station to come to. That's all been cleared off, and there's a nice lot. There's a nice sandbar out there, a sand access to the Indian River. And it would be very nice to designate that as a public access to the waterway for kayakers and sailors, non-motorized craft to go out there and we'll watch the launches from that area.
Hi, I'm Larry Carter. I'm with United Waterfowlers of Florida. The Waterfowlers of Florida has worked with the Space Center and the Wildlife Refuge during its whole existence. But when I look at one of the proposed usage of it, I noticed that an area that we call Buck Creek, which is in the no motor zone, which is a manatee protection area, is proposed to be a seaport. If you do not know that area, that would be the area that's north of 528. So that means in an area that historically we've only allowed paddlers, we would maybe now allow barges to transport material for there. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Our environmental process has nothing to do with that environment. The master plan is in place, okay? Now, when I say that, that's really up to the FAA. We could. Certainly they could consider those areas as part of their ASP. That's really straightforward in the KSC. Our master plan is in place. We're doing this because we want input on it. We're required to update it every 3 years by NASA headquarters. We will update it every year. As a matter of fact, we will update it on the fly. If we need to make some changes, we will do that. That's why it's online. So one of the things about this plan is different. It's not a big, I can't give you a big book. We don't have one. It's all online. So it can be accessible to everybody and we can modify it on the fly. So the master plan is dynamic and that will change as we change. Huge major changes like, okay, we're going to put all that in there. I don't know how to do it, you know. But, and that's it. So in answer to your question, you know, Spaceport and FAA are doing their EIS. We've allowed them, NASA's allowed them to do that. And we will use that data with FAA to make whatever decision we're going to make about China. This is available for where we want it. Actually, it's interesting. That is one of the things we're trying to address is climate change. And you know, depending on which model you look at, these are going to be islands in a not too distant future. So what do we do about it? And we said, well, if we really are going to continue to do infrastructure development to support whatever we're doing, where do we go back to? Where do we retreat to? That basically is our retreat for much of our stuff. Pads might still be islands, still be out there, but that's our retreat for a lot of our hazardous and estimated stuff. So a lot of this is a little different than you've seen before. You know, you haven't seen these areas, and these are the old citrus groves. Again, what do you want to develop, and where do you want to develop it? We're really thinking that's good for alternative energy, solar power, those kinds of things.
That's where you've got the solar.
Solar farm's right here, right now. Yeah.
And you're planning to do more here?
What we're going to do is we're going to see if anybody wants it. You know, much of what we're seeing here is not going to be NASA developed. It's going to be developed by commercial partners. And we will use this to help make decisions. People will come in and say, I want to go do this. We say, okay, that makes sense. Where does it make sense to do that? We put all that together. If there's additional environmental impact we have to consider, we'll do that additional NEPA documentation, and then we'll move forward. The logic for here is if you need something, if we're trying to commercialize this, if you needed something here, that's where you would put it. Could you do it all here? Potentially.
Yeah.
Again, these are just, you know, somebody
Understand.
really got to have it.
It's a concept. That's all it is at this point. That's banana creek. It's
No. Oliver Canal is up here. Way up here. Yeah. Banana Creek.
right. Here's 407.
Yeah. Okay, you've been dying to ask.
The only question I really want to ask is,
Sorry. Trying to squeeze in.
You don't want to know.
no, it's just, you know, you guys.
We had IT.
You guys have been working on this for years.
We had IT problems. First of all, we didn't get the actual approval from the NASA headquarters until the beginning of May.
Okay.
We have a whole process to go through. We did it all internally, and then we had to go to NASA headquarters, finally got the approval. And because it's a new what they call it, public facing website. There's a whole process we have to go through. And I'm telling you, we had to go press it because it's a new concept that we're trying to do. But that's why we did what we did. Yeah, we did. We did a press release the next day. The press release was a week and a half ago.
It's all happened 8 days ago.
Yeah, I know. We did a press release the next day. We put it on Facebook. We put it on Twitter. In fact, we got more social media hits on those social media for this website than we've ever gotten for any social media hit in 2.5 hours. So, yeah, I know that a lot of people are saying that. And here's the problem. We put out the notice of intent with the idea that we have a month, and then we ran into things. So I'm with you. I wish we could have done a better job of getting that out. The good news is it's out there now, and you got plenty of time to deal with it. We got 45 days for this, so we really want you guys to look at it. I wish we could have put it out.
There's things called
yeah. Good. We want it.
Of NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and explain the rationale for what we are producing here, which is a programmatic environmental impact statement. So to start off, what is NEPA? NEPA is our national charter to all federal agencies where we must assess and take a hard look at the potential environmental impacts associated with our actions. Our action here is obviously the master plan, and this is part of our NEPA process. This is the first step in our process, which is scoping. Next slide, please. So why a programmatic environmental impact statement? Programmatic environmental impact statements are typically very overarching. We look at them as they have umbrella coverage. Being that this is a master plan and we're not looking at site-specific projects, we're looking at broader land use changes. We felt the appropriate action would be to do a programmatic analysis of that, where it's more of a general view rather than a specific view, since our plan doesn't contain any definite, we'll say, on-the-ground projects. Next slide, please. So what is scoping? Why are we here tonight? We're here to determine the appropriate content for our programmatic environmental impact statement. We do that through receiving comments from you, the general public, our cooperating agencies and partners, as well as other state, local, federal agencies. Public participation, obviously a huge part of the NEPA process, and that's why we are here this evening. This is an excellent turnout, and again, I appreciate all of you coming tonight. And again, as I said, we are here to identify those issues that are going to be important in our analysis. So we encourage all of you to step up to the mic and give a comment, fill out a comment card. You can, we have an email address for the programmatic environmental impact statement. You can email us there, but please, let us hear your comments, let us hear your thoughts on this process. And with that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Trey Carlson, our Center Master Planner.
Good evening, thank you for coming. We are doing this to solicit your comments. Your comments are very important. Whether you decide to get them tonight or during the comment period over the next 45 days, we encourage you, we strongly encourage you to solicit all of your feedback. Thank you. Next slide. So our mission at KSC, we have, as you can see, we're supporting the Space Launch System. That is the new NASA rocket, which will have its first launch in 2018. The Commercial Crew Program has 1 or 2 commercial crew providers that will be launching from KSC or somewhere. And that is to service the International Space Station. I really don't like the way I have to turn around each time. To service the International Space Station. Part of the 2010 NASA Authorization Act is that we're to encourage and support the commercial space launch industry. We've done that through the past 4 or 5 years. We've been leasing out many of our facilities. We're sort of almost towards the end of that process. We've done Hangar Inn, NSLD, North Cape Canaveral, Pad 39A. Currently, we are in negotiations for the shuttle landing facility, as well as OPFs 1, 2, and 3. And then finally, along Launch Services Program, which is still launching from several pads from the Air Force side and providing payloads for Earth orbit and beyond. Next slide. So our master plan, we've actually been working with it for almost a little over almost 4 years now. Starting to be the first update since 2002, the first comprehensive update that we've done. The first project was the Future Development Concept, which we released in January of 2012. We've had that on our website for a while. It talks about how we are working with industry, federal, state, and local partners. We did a charrette in the fall of 2011 with that. And it really talked about the basis, it formed the basis of the plan as you see before you now. And the plan that you see before you now, it goes from a single government use entity into a multi-user spaceport. The master plan online breaks up this plan into the planning background, planning conditions, and then ultimately the future development, which is really the master plan portion that you consider with the future land use maps in the areas of the master plan. Next slide. So our core strategies within the master plan is to continue to support the NASA mission and programs. Divest without diminish is really what we've been doing for several years now, is really to maintain those types of assets here that we want to have that no longer KSC is paying for or has the responsibility of, but allowing commercial folks to come in. So that's all of our facilities that I named off, as well as a few others, allowing that capability to still exist at KSC for the use of the center, not necessarily have the federal government paying for them. I believe that is pretty much self-explanatory, and then going leaner and greener. How do we improve our operational, fiscal, and environmental sustainability? Next slide. So our future land use map, and what we've done with our future land use map is you look at the back and you go online. I encourage you to. It really talks about our government, industry, and commercial types of zones and operations that we have envisioned for KSC for the next 20 years. And there's our website. We tried to have the most easy to find website, masterplan.ksc.nasa.gov. It's masterplan.ksc.nasa.gov. And it's actually the first time we've actually, as an agency, had an external facing website. So it was just really released. The website was approved about a month ago and just released about a week or so ago as we move forward.